Hey, what's up? Welcome to Talk Politics, the only place where you don't just watch news, but help make it. Thank you to the various people out there that have contributed to our growing program. We appreciate your support. Thank you, Chris, Monica, Pete, Matthew, Liz, Bill, and Matt. Got a little bit of a new studio set up here. I wanted to change to a clearer screen and clearer system so that way you guys will be able to see better. If you're in the chat, let me know that you are watching. So that way we can keep in touch. How is everybody doing? All doing good? If you're doing good, let me know. Be glad to hear from you. Hey, thank y'all for joining. I know that it's a busy night. We were off last week because of Trump's town hall. Did you guys see that? Was it awesome? Let me know what y'all think. We're normally a little behind when we start a little bit later. There is no fancy transition either because we switched over to this new system here, so that way it comes in more clearly after looking at the stream in the past. I realized that it wasn't really that clear. So I wanted to go ahead and fix that so we can have a clearer stream. But hey, excited to talk with y'all. If you guys are out there, again, drop a comment. If not, we'll get started in a couple minutes, but I can't see anybody. So I don't see no comments. So until y'all comment, I don't know y'all are out there. Rip. Or can you guys hear me? Is the sound breaking okay? Yes, no, maybe so. Cool. Good to hear from you then. All good. Wow. So cool. All good. All right, great. Well, I suppose we get to it. All good in the hood. So we will start with the first segment that we normally start with, which is Pulse of the People. Pulse of the People. So we're behind because last week we were supposed to talk about. Well, we were supposed to talk last week and we didn't. But this week, hey, we are talking about the insolvent Social Security, and that it's a hot button topic. And I was asking, hey, do you believe presidential candidates have an obligation to discuss its future? Well, I certainly think so. And heck, most of y'all do too. With a 96%, yes, you guys said then that we should. But a lot of our conversation got into, hey, thanks for joining. If you're out there, drop a comment so that I know that you are alive and things are going. For whatever reason, Facebook changed my engagement. So some people see posts, some people don't. I'm not being shadow banned, but there is there's a streaming problem. So I'm not able to reach as many people. Fewer people come to the stream, and that's Facebook's world. Facebook's rules. So Ray mentioned yes, we should discuss Social Security, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts if you're listening. Should presidential candidates talk about that program? I think so. Nate mentioned that we could just give 7,000 to every newborn and put it in a low cost index fund, and we would save money that way instead of going out with the same broken Social Security program we have now. That politicians continue to be blinded by ideology in terms of talking about, hey, Bob's here. Bob's talking about porkfest.com. Kind of cool, huh? Well, hey, good to hear from you, Bob. I was just talking about Social Security and whether or not presidential candidates should talk about it. So many presidential candidates have ducked talking honestly about Social Security. And I wanted to know, is it really the case that people think that presidents shouldn't talk about it or not? But 90% of the people in this poll say that they do. And well, the whole thing needs rework, but we need to hear from presidential candidates talking about it. The former president, Donald Trump, says that he wants to keep things the way they are now. Wouldn't that be crazy? By that point, hey, yeah, I should be speaking at the festival on Wednesday in Porkfest, June 21st. We'll not be talking about Social Security, but what I do plan to talk about in the future there is talking about, well, presidents and whether they are responsible for tyranny. I think they are, and it would be particularly fitting to talk about the limits of presidential candidates and the executive branch during a election year. And Robert Kennedy will be speaking at Porkfest. Also, very interesting, Bob. But Bob, think about this. That this is the question that I want to ask and talk about. Should presidents have as much power as they have now? I think more presidential candidates should proactively campaign on limiting the power of the executive branch. I think that'd be a good time to start that discussion right now. Is the executive branch essential to United States liberty or not? It's a good question. I don't think they've done much to protect liberty in the United States. More often than not, they've implemented tyrannical decrees. They have undermined the judicial branch by threatening to pack the court. But hey, I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Do you believe that presidents protect freedom in the United States? I have my doubts, but I'm interested in hearing from you. And that ties into the next question that I asked on May 7th was in our Public Talk Politics group on Facebook. For most of the 20th and all the 21st century, presidents spoke directly to the people with ever-increasing frequency against the wishes of the founders. Do you support this? And, Tim Glass, who's normally in this stream, said, yes, communication is important. It gives us a true sense of involvement. The issues are hidden if we can't be in contact with those leading the country. Yeah, he is. But when it comes to communication, I think we should really go for less communication with the executive branch, right? It's more often than not, the executive branch undermines the will of Congress by going directly to the people, and then it really ties Congress's hands to the presidential agenda, which is not really what Congress's responsibility is. The president's supposed to be beholden to Congress, which is beholden to us. Well, more often than not, it does not operate that way, and that's contrary to what the founders seem to wish. So, that's how it be. Just like it be, Mr. Matt asked, hypothetically, who would you support in the PA Senate Republican primary? The overwhelming winner seems to be Dave McCormick with 36 votes. 1 vote for Sean Parnell, who probably will not be running. And what Eric wanted to highlight here is Oz might have made it if not for Mastriano dragging him down. So he's talking about the last race. And he mentions if the GOP nominates Mastriano for Senate next year, Trump or DeSantis or whoever can just forget about winning PA right now. So I think there's truth to that. And, well, I think it's worth thinking about. I also wanted to have a discussion about the polls. Polls, there's different polls that have been bandied about that have suggested that Donald Trump is so far ahead of DeSantis that it's not worth DeSantis' time for running. And the poll we have in our Talk Politics group right here suggests that they're actually neck and neck. So then what I wanted to ask is, how are we supposed to believe that DeSantis won't be competitive in the primary? And of course, those fake polls that have been utilized to say that DeSantis is way down, nobody wants to answer for the inaccuracy of those polls. Hey, thank y'all for joining. We get a new studio set up. We're just taking polls of the people and talking about fake news, fake polls, and whether or not DeSantis will be competitive in the primary. The Trump campaign, from what I understand, wants to paint the picture that DeSantis will not be competitive in the primary because of all kinds of polls. And many Trump people were suggesting, okay, well, the polls already said this, so that means we should just guarantee that Trump is the nominee. No, 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 no. That's not what the consensus wants. And so I wanted to point that out because I had over 200 people vote in that poll. So that's worth noting, right? And of course, the news doesn't even push back on their own stupid narratives. Newspapers don't compete with each other and call out other newspapers for being fraudulent. But here in our Talk Politics group, we provide unrivaled accuracy. And so I wanted to challenge that narrative. I did. And hey, what do you guys think? Should we just place all our trust in polls and just give up on candidates, or should we give candidates time to mature and ripen and grow and develop and see what it is that they're really able to bring to the table? I suggest the latter, but well, there's many that are insistent on a Trump-only primary. Then that we should be like Democrats and cancel the primary. Hey, thanks for joining us. We got a new studio set up. Talking about canceling the primary. Should we just cancel the primary and hand it over to Donald Trump right now? If you think so, it'd be interested in hearing you right here in the comments. Canceling that. And also, I guess I should read through what the show agenda is. So basically, the show agenda is we're going to be taking the pulse of the people. We are going to be, well, yeah. This user says yes, we should cancel the primary. Interesting thought. I don't think we should hand anything to anybody. I think people should compete. It's really interesting that the same people who say that they believe in competition, well, don't always believe in competition when it's about a candidate that they like. I think that's a tad hypocritical, isn't it? Either you support competition in all facets or you don't. Joe Biden is well, yeah, for sure, maybe. I'm not going to say that. I don't think he's functioning at a high rate. But I don't think that means that we should cancel the primary. But what I wanted to point out here in our show is that for those who are new, we do polls of the people where we talk about what's going on in our Talk Politics group. Then what we do is we cover national news afterwards. And there's a couple of big stories that I wanted to highlight that I know were not well covered. Josh, I've seen the RFK poll numbers on the Dem side a little bit, and it's good that they're having a more competitive primary. I think that's good enough, but I think we should just have more competition across the board. Personally, I think we should have open rank choice primaries, so that way people of both parties have to compete, and we as the American people could pick from. We could rank our top 4 or 5 candidates. Wouldn't that be preferable than just a winner takes all system? That because it seems like in the winner takes all system we have now, that creates so much incivility and BS that it drags down all of our politics. Yeah, right. So, and anybody who supports choice, if you support choice in the market, one would think that you would support choice when it comes to presidential candidates. But I still didn't mention the rest of the agenda. So what we were going to get into is whether or not China is a military threat, great power competition. The city of New York paying $38,000 per student. Mike Pence being supremely sensible on entitlement reform, which seems like a shot. And, well, the executive branch tyranny that wants to limit water in our washers. Did you see vintage Trump when he went on CNN? Now, I did not, Josh, watch the town hall. I didn't watch the town hall because, A, I don't believe in CNN. I'm not sure that I believe in town halls. And I didn't think that there was a lot that was going to be coming out of it. I don't think that. See, from my perspective, it seems like Trump and the news have a symbiotic relationship where, or a abusive relationship where they just beat each other up to help drive each other's ratings and advertising for one another. And to me, then that doesn't seem helpful or good, right? I don't think that's sensible at all, and I don't think that's a good way of doing business. And, well, it seems a little bit disingenuous. Why won't Trump debate? The first RNC debate is set up for August. It's already May. We have May, June, July, August, and Trump wants to skip it to do CNN. Then that seems absurd, right? So, seems super duper absurd. Makes no sense to me, and that's actually why we didn't live stream last week, was because of that town hall. A town hall that most people said was unhelpful. 66% of the participants said that it's unhelpful. Eric asked a helpful question. Why does CNN want to help Trump win the primary? So, one thing that I'm willing to bet that we will see is that you'll see CNN and Democrats actually lobby for Trump. The big media will unequivocally, 100% hands down, lobby for Trump. And heck, most people are not all too fond of the town hall format. There's not anybody who prefer, at least between town halls and debates, nobody prefers town halls. So, not all that excited for Trump CNN town hall. Seems a little absurd, right? But anyhow, it looks like we'll just do a shorter show tonight. If you want the show to continue, hey, keep sending chat, man. It's harder to keep the show on when there's not a lot of folks in chat. I know people get out of routine when there's a hiccup. I shouldn't have stopped for the Trump town hall, but I did. Here we are. So basically, the question that I wanted to ask is: should independents be excluded from the primaries? I don't think so, but a lot of people do. The well, at least the majority in this case, but I don't understand what the purpose of that is. If independents are a key group that you need to win any kind of election, why shouldn't they be able to vote in the primary? Right. So, I don't know. More people want to see articles in the group. A lot of people are planning on voting. And hey, the big answer to the question is China a military? Yeah, right. And that's what it is that I don't understand is how can it be that we believe in equal voting rights, but independents can't vote in primaries? We either have there's either equal rights or there isn't. I understand people think the independents would hijack primaries, but if we had open ranked choice primary where the top 4 or 5 candidates win, that would be the most sensible way of doing things. There's nothing more absurd than the system we have now, where party whoever is the biggest, well, who is a combination of two things: the biggest party extremist and the best party fundraiser. It's typically those two matters, and if the candidate is selected on a third criteria like electability, even then they face an uphill battle. Whereas if folks who are independent were voting in ranked choice primaries, then the top 4 or 5 best candidates would come out of that, and they would be able to decide who's the most electable or who should be elected. Instead, it's done too much by individual the two big parties, and I think it's a fatal flaw of sorts. Speaking of fatal flaw, we have China, and most thinking that China is a military threat. And I asked people, okay, without looking it up, how many military bases does China have outside of China? I put 150, 800, or something else, and not a single person got the right answer. China has one single military base. And so I think that's important to consider. Yeah, I think that's important to consider when we try to assess whether or not China is a threat. Right. And but they're not necessarily a threat economically either. The greatest see in just a basic way of looking at things, if we look at a nation's economy, military, and the relationships with other countries, if we just said that those are the three primary dimensions by which we evaluate the might of a country, China wouldn't be that strong economically. They were hit harder by COVID than we were. So, and then on top of that, no, of course, military wise, they don't have any military capability and they don't have any battle experience. To think that a group of inexperienced, probably malnourished and forced soldiers are going to beat people who chose to be a part of the military and are experienced in war would be absolutely crazy. And it would make no sense. And yet the news keeps pushing on us this fake narrative that we have to do all this stuff to counteract China, so on and so forth. And that it doesn't seem to be borne out in reality. And that's amplified by we have a scholar named Daniel Larison. He actually lives in Lancaster, and he actually researches war. He's a professor, or was a professor, if I'm not mistaken. And what he wants to challenge is the underlying assumption that the United States and China are in this great power rivalry. And that seems to be the prevailing assumption in Washington, D.C., that we're in a competition with China for power. He wants to challenge that and say, hey, this rivalry is actually making us stupid. Because by framing U.S. foreign policy in Asia in terms of a rivalry with China, makes us overreact to minor problems, just like what happened with that balloon. Nobody had any evidence that the balloon was actually causing anybody harm or had the capability to cause any harm. And when we're trying to assess threat, the top way that we should do that is by, did this cause harm? And if the answer is no, then we should let it go. But of course, folks in the media don't want to tell us that, and they want us to react and freak out so they can sell ads for Depends or whatever the heck they're selling. Daniel says, framing U.S. foreign policy nation in terms of zero-sum rivalry with China encourages silly overreactions to minor problems. Every episode in the conflict is turned into a setback for the U.S. and a win for China, but this is a silly way of looking at things. So he's talking about the canceled China trip between Biden and Chinese diplomats, and how when that's canceled, and it makes it seem like a big conspiracy that we're losing and China is winning. Approaching relations with Papua New Guinea and other Pacific states as if they are all part of a contest with Beijing rather than worthwhile engagements in their own right is one of the reasons why U.S. struggles to improve relations with many of these countries. So, what he's pointing out here, and I think is important and worth noting, is that because so much of our foreign policy is focused on being in an imaginary rivalry with China, we're not treating other regions with much respect, and as a result, it's causing them to be resentful of us. So this problem that we're having with China right now is undermining our relations with other foreign countries, and the greater danger isn't China, but these other countries not being willing to work with us because we are not being fair to them, and we're trying to make them choose between doing business with China and doing business with the United States in a way that's just patently false. It's a false dichotomy that doesn't exist. Such that Pacific states want to hear about the mitigating effects of climate change and increased trade rather than listening to U.S. officials tell them about grandiose American ambitions for the Indo Pacific, term that many Pacific states dislike, and opposing Chinese influence. Fortunately, the reason why Washington is paying more attention to these Pacific states is to enlist them in a coalition of states that don't want to join against China. So, you know, this should be an important part of our foreign policy discussion, because the implications of this alleged rivalry with China is having a worldwide ripple. As Daniel mentions, hyperventilating about this canceled trip will fade away, but the tendency to freak out over every little thing will only get stronger as the U.S. China rivalry intensifies. Rivalry encourages and rewards panic and fear mongering when calm and sober analysis is needed most. When the U.S. organizes its foreign policy around such a rivalry, it often takes unnecessary risks. And eventually, our leaders stop asking whether a policy is beneficial for the U.S. and begin wondering whether it will stick it to our rifle. And if the answer is yes, they will do it even if it comes at a great cost to us. In short, great power rivalry is stupid. So I just wanted to highlight that as politicians continue to talk about China in a way that seems to be unhelpful. I was talking with a good friend of mine. She had mentioned that a number of people in Congress were talking about this alleged competition we're in with China, and how we have to be afraid of all the stuff that China is doing to undermine us. And in reality, that's taking away their attention from looking at ways that the United States is undermining its its own sovereignty, its own power, and its own well-being. Of course, we can't look at that. We always have to point the finger at Chinese, Mexican, Middle Easterners, anybody but us. And that's the problem in the United States, according to our politicians. And I think that anybody should be concerned by that. Because we can fly the American flag. Let's start blaming Canadians. Yeah, it's the Canadians' fault for all the stuff that's going on here in the U.S. The other topic that we were discussing in our public talk politics group was ideology. And of course, I think I had a grammar problem here. I said, ideology seems to overshadow our ability to discuss political problems and find solutions. Most people agreed with that. But I don't think people are seeing things, at least from the same perspective that I am. When we talk about finding solutions to crime and criminality, more often than not, instead of people thinking about what's going on, they will defer to their ideology. And that means if you're a conservative, you have to be punitive And if you're a progressive, that means you have to be less punitive or perhaps just ignore crime altogether. And I think that's a false dichotomy that's stopping either side from finding a real solution to the problem. Right? So, hey, what do you guys think? Do you think that if more people were more ideological, that we'd have real solutions to problems? Or do you think that we should maybe reconsider our obsession with ideology? Be interesting to hear what you guys think, and wonder if you guys are still out there blaming Canadians. We got some other stories that are worth talking about. Before we get to that, make sure to support the show by going to etsy.com/shop/talking politics. There you can get the swag you need to show your support to keep independent thought alive and well when it comes to media. So get a mug. Hey, forget football. Our next Super Bowl is the next election. Well, in that case, Super Bowl's over. But still some good swag. So China wants to increase its military presence abroad. This was from 2022. I was just looking at articles that were explaining how many bases that China has outside of China. And in this chart, there's only one, and that's in Djibouti, which is it's a pretty good deal away from mainland China and seems relatively harmless. Now, this magazine speculates that there's at least a couple countries that China asked about a military base. So it's saying countries that China has probably considered to host a base, and China that countries that China probably approached to host a base. So we have just mere speculation that China even wants to expand its military bases, and yet we have the Economist doing exactly what it was that the last article said was silly, fear mongering about China, because this is speculation that has one base. Yeah, the idea that the U.S. isn't the major player in those regions is silly. It's exactly right, and it's just absurd to think that we have to worry about China increasing its military presence. I mean, it may be the case that going forward, militaries are becoming more and more of a money pit. In the United States, that's probably true. And the cost probably extends just beyond the actual dollars and cents. It probably, because we rely so much on our military, we don't look for any diplomatic or trade solutions. We just fearmonger. So, yeah. Uh, I don't know if they. I guess they are all women, aren't they, Josh? Well, that kind of looks like a guy. Even still, he doesn't look like he's a fierce fighting machine. How do we have a common sense approach to the military's budget? Hey, sharpest question of the night. Well, it starts by not inflating foreign trade, or forgive me, it starts by not inflating the threat of foreign invasion. We can't even have a common sense approach to the military's budget because we can't even be honest about which countries are threats and which countries aren't. So whether we make a cut or we don't, it almost makes yeah. You're right, Josh. I think we should reduce military spending, not just by a little bit, but by a lot. I think we need to reduce it big time. But we're not going to be able to do that until people can have a more accurate assessment of what the problems are and are not. And it's challenging for any honest person to say that China is any kind of foreign policy threat, or they're not a military threat. They can't be an economic threat because they have an aging population. And really, most of the damage that they would do would be by joining trade blocs with other foreign countries that eventually become a military bloc. That would be the most dangerous outcome. But until other people can reach that conclusion, then there's never going to be any common sense approach to the military budget. And if ask your politicians about that. Hey, why do we have to spend so much time money on the military? And they won't give you an honest answer. They'll either say, "Well, we're in a big war threat with China. They're going to come get us. They're going to come over here and take over our country." Well, no, no, that's not really true. They've China has never invaded another country fundamentally. So that's just simply not true. So, and moreover, I think more politicians should have a little more confidence in the uh, American people and our way of doing things, such that they don't feel paranoid to the extent where they insist that we have 800 plus military bases worldwide. Why is that happening? If we're such a powerful nation, why do we have to have 800 bases? Couldn't we do with 600, 500, 400, 300, 200? That and it kind of seems like it's that level of insecurity that makes us paranoid and double down and spend more, which is has been the typical way of doing things for at least the last 100 years, both in terms of our international involvement and then also domestically when it comes to policies. Politicians are so insecure and they have no trust in the American people to talk with them honestly about anything. That's why we have a social security crisis, because politicians are suffering from social insecurity. They don't think that they can talk candidly about that problem and get reelected. And that's kind of pathetic. And at least in my 2 cents, do you guys think that we should have politicians that refuse to talk about our problems, or do you think that people have to have a little more courage and honesty and integrity? I think we're owed a little more integrity than what politicians are giving us, but of course, well, I can't make anybody do anything. I can only host this show and, well, keep on talking about it. So we got this is the best story that was overlooked. The government created a new disinformation office to oversee all the other ones. Now, there was a big panic when politicians wanted there to be a panic about such a office before. But now, because it's starting to roll around the election, and now that we have a problem with Republicans and Democrats negotiating budget reforms, now there's no reason to get people whipped up. So we're not going to talk about the fact that our government just created a new secret agency to do who knows what. There's no transparency over what it's supposed to do. We now have a foreign malign influence center. And did you hear about that in the news? Did anybody talk about that? Did the great pundits at Fox News or CNN mention that? Did your newspapers mention that? Who exactly mentioned this? Probably nobody, and that's problematic. And that should result in people condemning these other outlets. So it was just recently mentioned that our government created a foreign malign influence center, and it was only after The Intercept asked filed information to ask about it, but nobody really knows what it was done, and its creation was only announced publicly after The Intercept, which is a magazine that focuses on spying and disinformation and so on and so forth, after they asked. Now, isn't that pathetic? But we have a government that's saying, well, we need to fight disinformation. So to fight disinformation, we're going to create a secret board to fight disinformation, but we're not going to provide you that information. Yeah, okay. Wow. That's courageous. Those guys deserve a gold star. So it enjoys the unique authority to marshal support from all elements of the U.S. intelligence community. And isn't that a funny word, the U.S. intelligence community? It's not a network. It's not the government intelligence community. No, it's not even government, U.S. government spies or government workers. It's a community, our intelligence community, not spies, because when they're done with work, they just go and they sit back and they start up the drum circle, and sit around the fire and sing "Kumbaya" and just hang out like the good old community friends. Just another a way to spend money that isn't there. Another attempt to crop up a crumbling building. No, prop up a crumbling administrative state. That's not honest. Now, this was apparently debated for months. Well, yeah, well, that no, well, but Josh, why would you deny them when it's part of the intelligence community? They're just members of your community. So that means like you can hug them, you can hang out with them, you can do anything you want. These are the good guys because the government says so. So the decision to create this new agency is puzzling for two reasons. The FMIRC duplicates the mission of the GEC. The GEC already produces assessments on influence operations. Congress did not elaborate on how the FMIRC would work with the GEC. And the GEC is the Global Engagement Center. And that already has a budget of 12 million. So, and the motto, the motto is exposing deception in defense of liberty. Isn't that not? That's pretty funny, Josh. I'm not gonna tell you. Yeah, it's a community, Josh. We'll say that. But our a secret agency was created that says exposing deception in defense of liberty. Well, how about this? Instead of exposing deception in foreign countries, why don't we expose deception in defense of the American people by telling people about what the government is doing? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be really neat? So, thanks for joining. I've seen some new folks get on. We're talking about the secret agency that's now been created by Congress called the FMIC that is supposed to police disinformation when we already have an office called the GEC, Global Engagement Center, to do that. Yeah, secret agencies are antithetical to liberty. I don't understand how these guys don't understand that. It enjoys, I mean, how can you say exposing deception? The only deception that's been exposed here is that our government doesn't want to talk about this secret agency that was created. Isn't that deception by not talking about it, by hiding it from the American people? So I would be interested in understanding how something like this is different. Yeah, who determines disinformation is right? But I'd be interested in knowing how this new office is different than the disinformation office that was already created or was going to be created before. How many secret offices do we have to have? You know, it's if these guys were eager to expose deception in defense of liberty, they would expose the deception that it's big business that's exploiting Americans because it's actually big government that's the number one employer in the United States. The federal government is the largest employer in the United States. So who is it that really has a monopoly on anything? Is it a business or is it the government? Deception by deception. Right. So, that's what I would like to know is if they want to expose deception, start with the deception that big businesses are hurting our country and that they have a monopoly. It seems like at this point, the federal government has the monopoly. Let's just look this up. Largest U.S. employers. Largest employer. And I bet you'll see that it is the government right here. Approximately 2.7 million civilian employees. There's there's no company that has 2.7 million civilian employees. So who's the monopoly? Where's on the left wingers jumping up and down about this? That our government has a monopoly on not only the use of force, but also on lawyers, the legal system, the workforce. Yeah, it's not that we have to pay their pensions; it's that we get to. We get to pay their pensions because they're serving us, our friends. The United States government is serving us, Joe. And if that doesn't bring you warm feelings in your heart, I don't know what's going on, man. These are great guys. So, another article worth discussing in terms of current events here is want Republicans. There's a debt ceiling right now. So for those who are not 100% up on how the budget works, Congress agreed to a debt limit saying, hey, this is the maximum amount of debt that we can have. And we've been, just overriding that and increasing the limit and increasing the limit and increasing the limit. And each time then that we normally do that, well, each time it's normally either Republicans or Democrats try to bargain with the other party for some special concession. And now, right now, the Biden administration is saying that Republicans are trying to take the government hostage, when in reality, they're trying to do what people have always done, which is to use this debt limit that has been overridden a number of times to make a deal to reduce spending, right? And so you had you had so all deficit reduction laws since 1985 were attached to these debt limit bills. And the showdowns between Republicans and Democrats were rare because both sides agreed that we needed to address the debt. Now Democrats don't believe there's that we should ever stop spending for any circumstance. Apparently, and I don't understand. Yeah, well, the debt ceiling should be a tool to bludgeon your opponent over the head with if you have opponents. But from 1985 onward, there were 8 separate times where both parties agreed to some kind of deficit reform. So, so you, it was never a problem to start with, and now it's gotten out of control. But without this tool, the debt limit, you have to go all the way to 1983, where there was legislation, deficit reduction legislation that was not tied to this limit. So this idea that we shouldn't be using this tool is just a way for the Biden administration to pander to people who don't know anything about the United States fiscal history. And heck, nobody even talks about it. CNN, Fox News, whomever, they don't talk about this because they don't care. They just want to have you engage in culture war nonsense so you can scream at your TV, feel like you're powerless, and then they can extract money from you without you caring because you already feel powerless and disenfranchised. But as Americans, we should actually feel empowered to call out anybody, any person, any time on their BS, including the government. And we should be able to do so with the full force of facts and knowledge. But, well, we got a lot of cowards still. But not you guys, because you guys are committed to finding out what's actually really going on. And I guess the last story that I will get to, and this came out about 9 days ago, but it was that, okay, what if the Ukrainian government actually succeeds in a counteroffensive against Russia? So a lot of Americans just seem to take it for granted that, okay, great, we love Ukraine, this is going to be awesome. But in reality, if they perform better than expected, it could still result in catastrophe. And that's why it would make sense to not continually fund them. And that's another thing that's going on. And I'll try to discuss that next week. But folks in Congress are already discussing more spending for Ukraine. They're just not going to talk about it because it's election season, and neither side wants to make that public. And news companies don't want to make that public because they want to be the friends of the government. Fox News, CNN, all those groups want to be friends of the government instead of honest to the people. And that's why this stream, again, is so important, because we're being honest. And anything that I have here is an article that you can see and cite and criticize. And if anything I say is stupid, you can say, hey, you're stupid. You're not lying. Or you are lying. You're not being analytical enough. And I think that's the standard. That's the standard that we should be able to hold anybody to. Any news show should actually be live and interactive. So that way, if somebody says something stupid, you can call them out. That's what you, as listeners, deserve. You deserve to be able to call out people for being stupid. And you shouldn't have to feel shame about it. Josh mentions Trump got a big pop from the audience in the town hall when he said he just wants people to stop dying, and he said he would have liked the war stopped in 24 hours. A bit of bluster, but people liked it. Well, people in that audience liked it, Josh, and that's what the problem is sometimes if you observe Congress or even the General Assembly, and you'll notice that what goes on in Congress and the Pennsylvania General Assembly, those people in there have minds of their own that are not totally aligned with what their constituents want or what their constituents know about. So Republicans feel like because they get pressure from the military and they're told that they must bend the knee to the military, then they must increase spending. So they do, each and every time. And even though that's contrary to what the American people want, because that issue alone isn't enough to threaten somebody's congressional seat, then hey, we'll just keep on sending it and we'll blame somebody else. Oh, we have to do this because of Russians, or Actually, it's not even about this. The chair of the I want to say foreign intelligence, Michael McCall. What he'll say is, well, we have to help Ukraine win because if we don't, Russia will go after Taiwan. And we all love the American people love Taiwan, so we can't have that happen. That's what's going on. And I don't think that that's totally true. And I don't think we should inflate the threat that way. Hey, good to hear from you, Bill. No one talks about a peaceful settlement when it comes to Ukraine. And that's right. So the U.S. is 100% willing to bleed every last Ukrainian dry if it means they can bloody Putin's nose, for sure. And it's another interesting story that I read was that it was predicted that the U.S. sanctions on Russia would drastically damage their economy, and it did for a while. But now their economy is actually scheduled to grow faster than what it was prior to the sanctions. So we're waging a proxy war. We have these sanctions on them, and it's actually helping Russia's economy grow and do business with just a different set of foreign countries. No, but Bill, that's what Republicans are going to vote for is spending on Ukraine. 100%. And I'm willing, and at least in Pennsylvania, you'll see at least one Republican probably spend on it. You'll probably see Brian Fitzpatrick at least vote for it. And it's up in the air. Yeah, Russia is selling oil to everyone. And what's also interesting, Bill, I just read the story the other day that Russia is selling oil to India, and then India is just turning around and selling oil back to Europe. so, so what has happened is we've seen countries try to cut Russia off when in reality it doesn't cut Russia off from anything, and it just increases the cost on their own citizens. Economies that are under sanction need to find creative ways to satisfy the needs of the country. Yeah, that's what those countries are doing, Josh. That's one reason why probably in the next 100 years the dollar won't be the world currency because other nations are tired of the U.S. sanctioning them in many ways that are hypocritical and damaging them for no reason. So that's exactly what's going on. Our sanctions aren't working, and politicians don't care because they always want to play the tough guy. Oh, we gotta blow up Russia. We gotta stop the Chinese. We gotta blow up Mexicans. We have to fight the cartels in Mexico. But in reality, they're doing it because they're frail, unthoughtful people who aren't telling the truth about what's actually going on. They're making things worse because they're just trying to pander for money and a sense of importance. And that's what's going on here. They if Ukraine won or was successful, then there's a chance that Putin would be forced to respond in one of two ways: negotiation or escalation. But given his belief in a long game scenario and willingness to absorb costs, then it's not clear that he wouldn't choose escalation. So, and those options would be throw more human bodies at Ukrainians or use a nuclear weapon. So, if Ukraine is successful, then that option is still apparently on the table. On all we're doing is pushing three of the biggest populations in the world united against the United States. Yes, that's exactly what's going on. But we have politicians who have no confidence in their ability to problem solve or work together, so they have to blame these foreign countries. They can't they can't be honest about our problems here. They have to lie. Just like the fentanyl crisis, The war on drugs created the fentanyl crisis. Fentanyl is an easier drug to smuggle into the United States than other drugs because it's more potent. And it's mostly white Americans that are smuggling fentanyl. But of course, politicians don't want to say that because that would require them to be honest. Instead, they want to say that we have to bomb Mexico, we have to get the military involved, we got to stop the cartels, and they don't have militaries don't really succeed against cartels. There's no history of that anywhere at all, anytime. But of course, politicians bank on you not knowing that so they can fundraise from you. Russia already appears to be preparing new rounds of mobilizations with the Wagner Group restarting troop. Yeah, everything's a war. We have the war on crime. We have the culture war. We're in a cold war against China. We're undergoing a civil cultural war. It's all war all the time. Let's hide under our desks. Let's be afraid. Let's start crying because it's all war. You know, it's so contrary to real life. Nobody's in a war for anything. And if it gets to that point, we'll be in a war because of stupidity and dishonesty. So, you know, the the stakes of nuclear escalation seems to be pretty high. Now, the United States and allies should have an objective. They should signal to Russia that using a nuclear weapon would be disastrous, that it should leverage Ukraine to not go into Crimea, which is a region that Russians historically view as theirs. And then we have to bring China to the bargaining table because really, if we don't, then they're going to continue to back Russia. See, now we've gotten ourselves into a bigger conundrum than I think what most people realize. That Russia, insofar as it has the backing of China, can continue to do what it's doing for a long time. But we're not going to be able to cut them off from China because we don't have any way to do so anymore. We have no tools to do that. We've already done tariffs, we do sanctions. What is it that we're going to do to China to undermine them to stop banking Russia? I mean, what is it that's going to happen? More economic threat that'll just put China, India, and Russia closer together. Yeah, people don't want to give China the image benefits of being a peacemaker. And I asked people that question in our Talk Politics group, and most people don't want to admit that actually, China is actually trying to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. But it doesn't totally have to because the more that goes on, the more business they can do with Russia. So whether it goes on or doesn't, it doesn't hurt the Chinese at all. So the more that we continue to lie about the Chinese and alienate them and insult them, the more that they can back Russia if they want to, and India also. And those countries aren't. China and India are not going to be likely to be partners with us if we keep trying to antagonize other countries. I mean, we've lied about China's military power. We lied about what they did to the economy. Yes, what they did with COVID was terrible and dishonest. But at the same time, before that, relations with China weren't good at all. So we didn't do anything to increase their trust such that they wouldn't lie to us. There is some United States culpability, but of course, before we can take responsibility, we have to lie about other people. So this opens the possibility China might be a fair partner in a peace deal. And the United States should find ways sooner rather than later to work with the Chinese on how crisis management might proceed in the event of a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive. But it's hard to see how that's possible when we keep demonizing the Chinese. Biden is using the administrative agencies to cut energy in dishwashers, which I think is tyrannical and out of his control. Here's an interesting tweet that apparently Trump put out about DeSantis. Trump campaign statement on Ron DeSantis. It's no surprise that Ron DeSantis and his political cronies have continued to terrorize the Florida legislature with the threat of his veto pen if they don't acquiesce to his demand to endorse his candidacy. Yeah, okay. I don't think any Republican. See, the statement, if you think about that, makes no sense. DeSantis would not. He's not in a. He has no reason to threaten to veto any bills because the lawmakers want to send him bills that he'll sign. Well, they have such a big majority to start with, and if they were going to draft something that he wouldn't sign, that just wouldn't even make any sense. Why would they do that? When actually now the legislature sort of has DeSantis in the bond. Hey, pass all of our priorities, or we won't support you. But we have to go with the smear statements here. In addition to that, we got another great thing. A gentleman named Richard Hania, who's an intellectual. He writes a good newsletter, and I would read it if you guys haven't before. But Trump hilariously just making up endorsements now. Trump on Saturday rolled out a slate of 150 endorsements from elected and grassroots leader in Iowa, but at least 3 people on the list tell Axios they were not consulted and remain undecided. Former GOP congressional candidate Gary Loeffler told Axios that his name was on Trump's list on Saturday while he was at a DeSantis event. He said, I lean Trump, but I 100% believe DeSantis is the future. Laura Carlson was surprised her name was on the list and wonders about the truth of these other endorsements. And another longtime GOP activist said that they were added to the list without a request from the Trump campaign or any agreement from her. Cool. Good old, honest presidential politics. This is really what it is that we need the country to get into the right direction. Is hey, forget about talking about policy, forget about trying to get independents on board. We have to make up lies about DeSantis and then just put together a fake list that's not real. That's what's going to do it. That'll get us back on track. Well, that's how were the other endorsements obtained? Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Josh, and that would be worth investigating on its own. How did he get the other 150 endorsements or 147? Yeah, sure, Bill. That's the problem with presidents. That the more presidents speak to the American people, the more they lie and overpromise and distort things. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, but they should probably be canned. They shouldn't be on TV. So we got that. We have the New York City spending $38,000 per pupil. What does it buy? Well, mostly buys union money. So $38,000 per student on 23 students is $874,000. and 40% of that is for administration, facilities, maintenance, meals, utility, transport, testing, compliance, and such. Oh boy. So that's about $15,000. And there's one counselor for every 325 students. And they send out laptops for $350 per student, two phys ed teachers, all this other nonsense. So, you know, stuff. Yeah, right. No, but Bill, I don't think anybody's letting Biden lie about anything all the time. I'm merely suggesting that presidents shouldn't be on TV at all. We shouldn't let presidents be on TV anytime. We should let presidents be on TV for the budget address, but that's the only yeah the only way that they should be able to speak to the American people is if the budget is passed on time, and that's it. They shouldn't speak to the American people at all. That's really not what a president is supposed to do. Just fundamental. Bill, you want to talk about the Durham report? I see, Bill. I didn't research the Durham report because everybody else is already. Yeah, right. That's what we should have, Josh. Is that if the executive branch passes the budget on time, then they get to speak to the people, and if they don't, then they shouldn't be able to just demagogue us for no reason. I mean, that's stupid. Now, of course, CNN and all the other news companies want you to like the presidential speech so they can get their ratings boost. So, of course, they'll never be honest about that. Has anything on TV? It isn't. TV is a dishonest medium. So we'll cover a bit during the report, though. Why it matters to democracy, Demi can have corruption, have FBI and its accomplices. Now, one thing that I did tell you guys before, though, is that the FBI had been working as an anti-corruption unit in actually for the Ukrainian government. So if you think that this is the only reason why the FBI should go, the fact that they're working for another foreign government without anybody's explicit approval, if you don't think that they should go for that reason too, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's the issue is deeper than just Trump alone. Makes clear that a partisan FBI became a funnel for disinformation from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, here's another reason why, Bill, that I didn't cover the Durham report, was because is this relevant to assessing what's going on with the FBI? Yes. But in some ways, it's relitigating 2016 in a way that we don't have any power to change. I can't do anything about 2016 or what happened in 2020. I don't have any control over that. And it seems like a lot of Republicans want to dig up stuff from the past and say, see, well, okay, you can, well, if you can trust the government, if you trusted the government before the Durham report, then I think that's crazy. if you said, the government, even though Congress has never really had an approval rating above 50% in however many decades, I trust them. Yeah. I don't know about that. They should have never been trusted to start with. I mean, particularly after FDR, in my mind, violated checks and balances by threatening to pack the court. That's the executive branch doing a stunt. After that, nobody should have ever been trusted because agencies should have never had the power. He shouldn't have weaponized so many agencies back then, and he should have never felt emboldened to do that. So, that's why I didn't cover this. I just presume at this point, Bill, that the FBI and CIA aren't corrupt. Yeah, Trump did expose some corruption, Bill, for sure. But these agencies were exposing themselves as corrupt even prior to that. I mean, the one of the executive branch agencies, the CDC, supported mandatory vaccines for 150 million people. Hey, we need to have mandatory vaccines. No, that's not what the Constitution says. These agencies have been corrupt the whole time. They've now just felt emboldened because of history of corruption. The EPA has always been corrupt. Now that Trump did highlight some of it for sure, but will this result in anything substantial? When the IRS was found guilty of denying Republican organizations nonprofit status, what happened then? What was Lois Lerner indicted? Did Lois Lerner go to jail? Did Congress pass a law to do anything about that? They did cut the IRS budget, but what else happened? Nothing. So people are upset now, but will it result in any legislation? Probably not. And that's one thing that I didn't. That's part of the reason why I didn't cover this, because I think at this point in time, any Republican should categorically accept that we need to cut back on all of these agencies. Like that should be taken for granted at this point in time. Well, I don't know who was in that or not, though. But even then, it's not totally a matter of going to jail or not. It's also a matter of cutting these executive agencies. These executive agencies can do anything that they want. They just created a new executive agency to talk about foreign disinformation. Does anybody know about that? No. In fact, I think 2 weeks ago I was talking about all the weapons and guns that these agencies are buying. Did anybody care about that? No. So this idea that we have to be upset about a specific agency when other agencies are doing the exact same thing and there's kind of a free for all in the agencies, I don't need to reiterate that point. I almost covered that weekly. I don't know if they want Trump in prison because he fights this. Well, I don't. I guess I don't know who you mean by they, Bill. But Trump has not totally fought the political system. What Trump has done. He passed an executive order that said for every two regulations passed, two more have to be repealed. But outside of that, did he get rid of the EPA, the Department of Education, the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ? No. So nobody's fought these agencies at all. There hasn't been a single president that's done that. And Republicans haven't fought any of these agencies. That has never happened. What some Republican judges will do is they will limit the power of some of these agencies to some extent, but even they don't want to touch that. Trump was the system for 4 years, and only rolled back regulation and unnecessary laws. The new shiny toy that Republicans roll out is that they will roll back the federal government. Yeah, I don't think any Republicans. It's going to take 12 years to get rid of these agencies. It doesn't just happen overnight. Well, it's going to take a lot longer than that, Bill, but I don't believe most Republicans are serious enough on that issue. So, but Republicans don't generally outside of a few academics in places like Hillsdale College. Most Republicans don't talk about these administrative agencies because instead we have to worry about what's going on CNN. We have to worry about the party talk that our presidents are using. We have to, stare off in outer space. But we're not doing enough in these agencies. Anyhow, I will be closing it down here shortly. Well, I think the issue is deeper than just the term rhino, Bill. I think the issue is that a number of Republicans are not educated on that particular issue. And until we insist that both constitutional education is a requirement for Republicans, until we insist on that, then that, and heck, even Democrats too. Democrats should be just as mad about these executive branch agencies. Democrats jump up and down about democracy. There's nothing democratic about an executive branch saying 150 million people have to get a vaccine. So it shouldn't be one party or another. But until constitutional literacy is a base level criteria for anybody we elect, and that's not going to happen. You have politicians that don't know anything about the political philosophy of our country, and they just point to the American flag and bald hero or bald eagle and say, "Well, we're big heroes." Yes, Democrats in some ways love government control, but I think it's a case, Bill, that people haven't made the case to them as to why they shouldn't support these executive branch agencies, so they just go along with the status quo. But if they're to be consistent with their own philosophy, then they can't support these big executive branch agencies. Then that would be totally inconsistent. But people haven't even tried to make that case. Anyhow, I do want to ask you guys, what do you guys think of the new layout? Has it been a little clear? I figured that it would be a little clearer and things would look a little nicer and come in a little more smoothly. So, do you think that's going on? Is things clear enough for you? Do you think it looks better? I thought the previous layout was slow and lagged a little bit, so I changed to this. But I'm happy to go back to the old format if you guys think that old format was better. So let me know here in the comments in 2 minutes. You like the new format? Thumbs up, or heck, even just a one. One if you like the new format. Two if you like the old dusty format. Yeah, does this look cleaner than the other one, Bill? Because I thought that the other one lagged. So that's why I made the change. I don't have the same transitions, but it seems like it comes in a little bit neater and cleaner. And yeah, there's a little bit of a mess in the background with the doors and stuff. And I don't have anything cool back there yet, but I just thought that this would be a little bit better. So I don't know, man. Well, you can put some funky backgrounds on. Anyhow, hey, that's all we have for the show tonight. Again, hey, good to see you back, Josh. It's been a while. Happy to have you back on every Wednesday night at 8:30. Make sure to come back. I'll be in out of state next week. I will try to be on, but I can't promise that I will. But I do want to be on. So yeah. All right. Well, hey, thank you all for joining the stream. Until next time, keep talking politics.